So how should you prepare for GMAT verbal? See, the first thing you want to keep in mind is GMAT verbal is not a test of English as such. Because mostly when you say English, what you're thinking is vocabulary, grammar, all those things. Stuff that we used to study in school. But GMAT won't test you on any of those things. No vocabulary, no grammar, no writing. What it will test you on is comprehension and critical thinking. Just those two things. So can you understand difficult text by eliminating all the fluff that's there? Can you draw valid inferences from arguments? Can you figure out assumptions in arguments? Those are the kind of things an effective manager would need to be good at. And that's what the GMAT is testing you on those. So don't think that you're preparing for English, you are preparing for verbal reasoning. Reasoning being the operative word over there. Okay, so how do you go about your prep? Again, let me take you back to the main GMAT prep strategy video I've done where I speak about the 3 stages of your prep. Stage 1 was accuracy, stage 2 is time management, stage 3 is full length tests. You will still be following those, but now specifically for verbal. So stage 1 is when you work on your accuracy. How do you do that? You start by studying concepts from some third-party resource. Don't directly jump into OG and start doing questions. It will be a very bad idea. Because even if you get a lot of them correct, you won't know why you are getting them correct. So when the difficulty level increases, you will most likely end up struggling. Time will also be a problem. If you start answering questions by instinct, then what you will do is you will read every answer choice multiple times and try to eliminate based on what sounds correct, what looks correct. That will also be a time sink because you will end up using too much time. You won't be confident, you won't have clarity on why you are doing what you're doing. So please do some concepts first. And concept for what? For critical reasoning. That's the one you want to get started with, not RC. Reading comprehension, do it later once you've done CR. So refer to some good resource. There are books. I wrote a book, CR Grail. There are other good books also. There are free videos online. You can of course use paid resources, but do some concept building for critical reasoning because if your concepts are weak, for example, if you don't have the ability to dissect an argument, then you will struggle not just on critical reasoning, but a lot of other question types as well. Two-part analysis, for example, which will test you a lot on arguments. The most important component in critical reasoning, by the way, will be the assumption. Indirectly, it will be tested on 5 question types within critical reasoning. Assumption questions, evaluate questions, strengthen, weaken, flaw. All of those are at the conceptual level testing you on assumptions. So spend time on that. That's the first thing I typically get started with when I teach people critical reasoning, the concept of assumption. It takes a little getting used to. So what you're doing is, you're doing concepts through some third-party resource and then you practice questions from the OG, once again, the main OG. Do not use third-party questions in stage 1 of English. It will be a very bad idea because it will ruin your understanding of what is a GMAT type question in the first place. So please start with official questions and you don't need to wait to finish everything in critical reasoning before you start with questions. For example, the moment you've finished the topic of assumptions, you start doing assumption questions from the OG. It's very easy to segregate questions in critical reasoning in the OG. The moment you finish strengthen and weaken, start doing those questions. So don't wait till you finish the entire critical reasoning syllabus and then start with doing questions. Start it alongside and maintain the error log. That will be very, very useful eventually in you arriving at a trend in your mistakes. What kind of question types are you getting incorrect? So start with critical reasoning. Stage 1 is building your accuracy on critical reasoning. Once you are done with critical reasoning, then move to reading comprehension. Because a lot of what you learn on critical reasoning will apply on RC as well, which is why I want you to first hone your skills on CR and then move to RC. For RC reading comprehension, one mistake a lot of people make is to assume that there is no strategy for RC. That there is nothing that can be done for RC, so we have to just read and forcefully understand whatever the passage is saying, which you will spectacularly fail at because you can't force yourself to comprehend something, right? So there is a reading strategy for RC as well, which you need to understand and follow. Like at a very broad level, you don't want to go too much into the details mentioned in a passage, which is what most people do, by the way. On the first read, you want to understand the structure of the passage. What is the passage very broadly talking about? How are the different paragraphs in a passage connected to each other? Those are things people typically miss out on. Get some understanding of the various question types that get tested on RC and strategies to approach each of those. Like the global questions, main purpose, you have detailed questions, you have inference questions, you have function questions, right? A lot of them. Again, I've covered all this in our RC grade, of course. which you can take a look at. One thing, stay away from fancy abbreviations. So you will have tutors and test prep companies give you, fancy abbreviations which are supposedly strategies to tackle RC. Don't fall for those gimmicks. At the most basic level, RC is testing you on comprehension. But there is still a way to approach it, which is what I want you guys to understand. Right? So even for RC, same thing. Once you've done all the theory for RC, which won't take too much time, CR takes longer, move to doing practice passages from the OG. For RC, absolutely start with the OG, because unofficial passages will not be representative. I mean, I know I've made those, right? Once upon a time, RC Grill and CR Grill, both the books had a lot of practice questions. But eventually I've discontinued those and I only use official questions, even though I had made those questions myself. So imagine, I still decided to discontinue those. Why? Because even though I've done a very good job, I don't think they are representative of what you will see on the GMAT. And there are so many official questions. Why will I want to waste my time and effort and your time making you do unofficial stuff? They can't be better than the official stuff, right? No chance. So please stick to official questions. So stage 1 is concept building stage. Once again, in the OG, you're targeting an accuracy of about 70-75% in RC and CR both. So once stage 1 is done, then you move to stage 2, which is your time management stage. Stage 1, when you're doing questions, keep in mind, you're not doing them timed. So you want to give a broad idea of the time in your head, like you don't want to be taking 5 minutes and 6 minutes on each critical reasoning argument. That will be a bad idea. But don't obsess over time. Like when you make a mistake, I don't want it to happen because you were rushing through that question. Not in stage 1. That will happen in stage 2. So when you come to stage 2, start taking timed section tests. 14 questions of critical reasoning in 25 minutes, 4 RC passages in 30-32 minutes. And where will you do them from? You've already used up the main OG for stage 1. So for stage 2, use the verbal OG. Or just drop me an email. I've got a lot of good section tests for verbal, which only contain official questions. I'll send them across to you. It's free, don't worry. I'm not charging you anything. They're not my questions. They're official questions. I've just compiled them in a nice manner. So that is stage 2. That is where you will fix any bad habits that might have crept in. For example, you are rereading every answer choice 2 times. You can't do that. There won't be so much time. You are going back to the passage multiple times in RC. You can't do that. You're not doing any pre-thinking in critical reasoning, which is a topic on which I'll do an entirely separate video, because I keep reading things like pre-thinking is a bad idea. I mean, that's absolutely silly. Pre-thinking is the best thing you can do for critical reasoning and some other question types also. So start doing that. That will make you go faster. If you look at every CR answer choice 5 times, that will just slow you down. That's not the right way to go about things. So pre-thinking is a very, very important component of your CR strategy. Eventually also RC, and I also use it on DS and other things, which I've discussed, for example, in the DI Grail. But use the pre-thinking. Don't approach questions passively. Right? So that's stage 2. Stage 3, of course, is full length test, where you will be doing all 3 sections together and fixing whatever problem you identify. So that's your broad verbal prep strategy. So let me also give you some more strategic tips. So the stuff you learn on critical reasoning won't just apply to critical reasoning. It will also be applicable on data sufficiency. You have those reasoning type verbal questions these days appearing on DS. It will be applicable on a lot of questions in 2-part analysis. So keep that in mind. Similarly, for reading comprehension, the strategy you use for RC will apply big time on MSR, multi-source reasoning. I tell it to my students all the time. Whatever I've taught you for RC, try applying that on MSR and see how much it helps. In case you find it difficult to concentrate while reading an argument or a passage, one complaint I get from students is, like in a critical reasoning argument, the moment I reach the last sentence, I've forgotten what was there in the first sentence. That's not a problem of memory. That's a problem of lack of concentration. I'll give you a simple trick to solve that problem. Start writing. A little. Take some notes. And in shorthand, because you won't be going back to them. But the moment you put pen to paper, your concentration will not wander. It helps big time. So try it on CR, RC both if you find it difficult to concentrate. And as you review your mistakes, try to pick up a typical wrong answer wording. There is a typical language that GMAT uses for the correct answer, also for trap answers. Try to catch those. Don't just focus on the correct answer. Also look at the incorrect ones. And once you've done enough questions, enough passages, especially in RC, you will be able to catch that. Like right now, if you give me a completely new official passage, don't let me read the passage. Give me the questions directly. On a lot of the questions, I think at least 50%, I will give you the correct answer without reading the passage. Not to show off, but that's because I've been doing it for so long that I've got a very good understanding of what's a typical correct answer language and what's a typical trap answer language. So watch out for those. Look out for what I call a good wrong answer, and don't fall for that good wrong answer. One last thing, if you're absolutely acing the OG questions, then towards the end, you can try some higher difficulty questions, which will be LSAT questions. I normally don't recommend them because a lot of them are plain weird and of course also more difficult. And at least don't do them initially. It's a very bad idea. But once you've done enough official stuff and you want to challenge yourself a little more, you're doing very well on the official stuff, then yes, I do make people do some LSAT questions also to make sure they don't become overconfident. But it's not a must. I mean, I only do it with 20% of my students, just to give you an idea. 80% I don't bother. And a lot of them score very, very well. So it's not like if you don't do LSAT questions, you won't get a good score. Right, let me end by talking a little about verbal scoring. See, the scoring pattern for verbal is pretty normal, not like math, which can be very up and down. So 5-6 mistakes should be your target, which will give you like an 83, 84 most of the time. So of course, not a perfect science. The number of mistakes don't exactly correlate with your score, but on verbal, they still do. So target 5 or 6 mistakes. 5 mistakes is ideal on verbal. One thing I have observed over the years is critical reasoning has become more difficult than it used to be. Like about 10 years back or 8 years back, critical reasoning was the easiest section on the GMAT. At that time, there used to be a third section also in English called sentence correction, which was my favorite section. Discontinued now. Now you only have CR and RC, and critical reasoning has become more difficult for sure. Reading comprehension, no, it's the same level as it used to be earlier, but critical reasoning has become a little more difficult in terms of the argument itself, and also the answer choices sometimes tend to be very, very close. Just an observation. But yeah, that's your prep strategy. So get started with it, and if you need any help, any resources, feel free to drop me an email. Cheers, everyone.